All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Powerful Perspectives, where we bring you world changers, entrepreneurs, some athletes coming up that are going to get interviewed on this platform that we've created here. And what we're trying to do here, guys, is to bring you different people, different experiences that will change your perspective on different topics, whether it be entrepreneurship. In this case, it's going to be a little bit of education and beyond. But I'm here with my good buddy, Ronnie Esposito. Ronnie is the founder of Acton Academy, Pittsburgh, and we are actually here in Acton Academy. And so today we want to dig into a little bit of Ronnie's story, a little bit of how Acton got started. And I'm excited to share this one with you guys because, to me, changing people's perspectives is what we're all about, right? Trying to expand people's thoughts, expand their experiences in life to be able to give them a more well-rounded view of everything from education to entrepreneurship to family to spirituality, everything. And I think that this is going to be an interview that touches a lot of those things. So, brother, thank you for being here.
Thanks
for taking the time to do this, man. So let's just jump right into it, man. So you and your wife, Megan, started Acton a few years ago. What was it that drove you to do this? Because this is not your full-time thing, right? This is something that you took on, really what I know as a passion project.
Right.
And it's a big task. It's
Yeah.
a big ask of people to have you leading this charge of creating this and managing Acton Academy. So what made you want to start this in the first place?
Oh, it's a great question. It's a long one. So long story short, I was driving down the road listening to a podcast and listening to this guy talk about his kids in school and whatever else. And he was, talking about how passionate his kids were and excited to go to school. And he had mentioned Acton Academy. I'll pause there. If you back up, my daughter, we have 3 kids. My oldest was in public school. We actually moved close to a public school because it was going to be so convenient. I'm not a normal kind of guy. I don't just follow a cookie cutter. So we had, enrolled my daughter in the public school. And within the first month and a half, she had come home with a stack of worksheets and just didn't like school. I mean, it was a grind to get her to go to school every day, which is half the problem, I think, today. So we had left that school, went to a Montessori school. We actually really liked it. It was hands-on. The teachers were great there. We got called into that school to say that they weren't going to be continuing their program. It was devastating to us. It's like, well, now what do we do? There was a peel-off from a couple of parents that decided to start their own school, and it's a lot of work. And I didn't realize, and I don't think they necessarily realized how hard it was to cut down the red tape in order to start a school. So we gave it a shot. 6 months later, the school closed. I was forced to think of another plan. And it was literally on my birthday around mid-July, 2018. I was driving down the road. I listened to this podcast. And the guy was talking about Acton Academy. And I Googled it as I was driving. I think I may have hit a few rumble strips. And I literally was thinking to myself, I came home and I told my wife, I said, we have to move to Austin, Texas. She said, for what? I said, Megan, you have to hear about this school. It's amazing. So I go online, find out that you can actually apply for it's somewhat of a franchise model, but it really isn't. They had no intentions of franchising it, but had so much interest from parents all across the globe that they kind of put a package deal together. Interviewed for the process. A couple months later, we were granted the authority or the license, I guess, to be able to start an Acton Academy here in Pittsburgh.
Amazing, man. Amazing. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the different types of education, I did some research before this interview, and the Montessori style of learning, what I found on the internet was Montessori is a method of education that is based on self-directed activity, hands-on learning, and collaborative play. In Montessori classrooms, children make creative choices in their learning, while the classroom and the highly trained teacher offer age-appropriate activities to guide the process. And so really different than, the traditional learning that I believe you went through and I went through, in the classroom. What's interesting to me is I think back about my own education, right? And I think back to many of the teachers that I grew up learning from, follow me on social media. And man, what they did for my life was incredible, right? Being able to teach me the things that I know today, the foundational blocks of those things. But I can't help but ask, what if I was in a different situation when I was growing up? What would that look like? And how would that have resulted in, maybe things in my life being different? And one of the quotes that I came across that I want to read, because before we started recording here, I mentioned this to Ronnie, and he said that was the quote that really made me decide to make this move to open Acton. The quote says this: "Imagine if Picasso's teachers told him to drop the paintbrush because he was already good enough at art and needed to focus on calculus." And that stands out to me. I've got 4 children, 2 of which are enrolled in this school. We found it, fell in love with not just the school, but the community that's been built around the school, the people who, their children attend this school. And, I believe that, when it comes to education, the power of community is really what multiplies kids' ability to learn, their level of comfort learning. I've watched the change in our children just in the short period of time of being around this type of environment. And it's first of all, man, thank you for doing this, because it's a blessing to our children. And I know to all the other children that attend this school, to have that type of, again, just open imagination type of learning that they get to experience here. So that quote about Picasso, what does that mean to you, and how did it impact you when you heard it?
It just made sense. Again, I always go against the grain. If I'm going with everybody else, I feel weird. It's just, I can't explain it, So instead of trying to, we always in school, I did well. I got A's, but I stressed out like crazy, and I would study, and you would learn to know, meaning, you memorize certain aspects of what you have to memorize to get through it. And then, in my situation, I kind of dumped a lot of that information. I didn't retain a lot. I didn't learn it. In this type of environment, you learn to learn to do, and learn to be, breeding confidence. If you would have told me how hard it was to start a school and to get through all the red tape, and I would have known all of what I had gone through over the last 3 years, I probably wouldn't have done it, to be totally honest with you, because it's hard. It's a lot of hard work. But once you start to get the right team in place, once you start to get a little bit of wind behind your sails, and you start to get that small win with anything that you do in life, it starts to unfold. And so this was kind of a calling that I remember coming home from a Steeler game in an Uber with friends. And we talk about this all the time. They're neighbors of ours and great friends. And I said, we should start a school. And it was such a weird idea. Like, who says that? But it was a calling. I don't know. It was something that I felt deep in my heart to kind of cultivate. The quote is all about passion, finding passion. If you don't have passion and purpose, I don't care what you do. Those that, and we all know those people who say, oh, a couple more years to retirement, another day, another dollar. I can't wait. And and that's great for some people, but without that purpose and passion in life. And for me, I still get like, this situation here is uncomfortable to me. I'm not used to this.
You're doing great, man.
Well, I'm not used to this. And this is something that I'm 42 years old. And this is this is the first time I've ever done something like this, where it's a actual situation like this. But to be able to breed passion, purpose, confidence in 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and to be able to grasp onto something in life that turns them into just a fixture in society, to having that purpose and waking up with that purpose to fuel. That's contagious. Imagine what kind of impact that'll make on the world in the future if you can have somebody to take that information out into the world.
Yeah, I think, in today's world, man, we have such a lack of critical thinking, like that ability to think freely, I guess, is the easiest way to describe it, and there's a lot of conflict around that topic, in today's world. But I believe that, when our creativity is opened, and we are able to, again, think independently, when we don't, to your point, when we don't just follow along. Now there's a counterbalance to that, sure, too, right? And making sure that we're not doing something opposite of the pack just to say that we're different, right? I think there's value in that balance as well. But, everything that you read about children and their ability to be developed, the younger that we get those creative things, figured out, where they're allowed to think freely, learn how to solve problems, learn how to do the things that are necessary to survive in this world. And we were talking about this before we started, but This world that we live in has become, a really corporatized, for lack of a
Yeah.
better description, world. And that's nothing, again, nothing against corporations, nothing against any of that stuff. But even the corporations will benefit from having young people who have the ability to independently think
Yeah.
and be creative. And that is what this is all about. So, why don't we talk for a minute about, the difference between like what it looks like a day in the life of a student at Acton versus, what most people might be used to, right? What are some of those differences that they experience on a daily basis here?
We're currently licensed from kindergarten to 8th grade. We have two separate, I wouldn't even call them classrooms, but two separate kind of studios where you have kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade in one, and then 3rd through 6th in the other. We can go up to 8th, but we don't have 7th and 8th graders just yet. We've grown tremendously fast over the last couple of years, but one of the biggest differences is just mixed ages. It's kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. So is it a challenge for the guides and the aides that we have here? Yes, it's a challenge, but the kids learn from each other. Whenever your kids come home and they have a vocabulary that's different than when they left, it's like, where did you learn that? And I think it's a different way of guiding, of teaching, of learning, but it's very impactful. So that's the first thing. Socratic discussions are something that we have on a daily basis, presenting a real world problem where you have to take a hard stance. And one of the examples that we have many, but one of the ones that we always say is it more important to say please or thank you, and why? And just kick it around and just have kids answer that question. Well, I think it's more important to say please. Why do you say that? Anybody disagree? I do. I agree that, or I feel that it's better to say thank you, because if you don't say thank you, and just listening to how kids process that is way different than us. Our brains have been clouded with so much stuff, and we're looking differently through the lens as an innocent child is. So it's nice to hear their perspective on things. Going on from Socratic discussions is core skills. This is one of the most important parts is our eagles or students are able to learn at their own pace. Throughout the process of onboarding, I interview parents separately, and then we bring the kids in and interview them as well. And the one student I can remember, he came to my house and I interviewed him, and I said, if you could have one goal for this upcoming year, what would it be? He said, I want to be 2.5 grade levels ahead of where I am from my age standpoint. I said, well, you can do that. And guess where he finished? 3 grade levels ahead of where he was. Now, I'm not saying that that's every student, but imagine that particular boy in another school, not knocking any of them, but in another school where you have to follow along, and it's not going not going as fast as he would want to go. I would assume that he would be really bored. Same as those that are behind a little bit. So you're able to have an individualized plan to be able to work at your own pace, making it fun and getting to where you need to be on your own schedule, which I think is important. In a traditional school, you get a C, you get a B, you move on to something harder. You barely got through that, and now we're going to put something even heavier on you. At some point, you're going to lose that kid, and it's not fun. I've been there. We've been there. Again, this Acton model is not meant for everyone. There's no doubt about it. And I think a lot of kids do succeed in public and other private schools. But for those that just feel like something is missing, it's an unbelievable option. So I can continue to go on throughout the day. One of the other things that we highlight as far as the afternoon goes are what are called quests, real world projects that kids actually work on together to solve problems. There's a wide array of what we can actually accomplish here if you get kids together, you focus on the problem. They have 5 weeks to come up with the solution, and then we have an exhibition for parents to come in to show their hard work that they've accomplished. So it's a very unique way of looking at things, but we're trying to run this like a, for lack of a better term, like a small business that the kids own, and getting them involved in each other's, learning from each other, I guess, rather than just learning to know.
Yeah, it's so I want to unpack definitely, because I know for a lot of people they say Socratic, the Socratic method or the Socratic discussions. What does that mean? Like, what is the goal of that? How is it different than maybe what people are used to?
Guides or teachers at this school can't answer questions. You have to get the kids to think. So you answer a question with a question, and the Socratic method just gets the creative juices flowing. we always say that we have a plane that's flying at 30,000 feet. And at any given time or day, you're going to have some kids or all of them where that plane starts to come down. And your job as a guide is to pick it back up. And if it gets too high, bring it back down. So you want to create that even flow, if you will, to allow that creativity. And asking questions gets kids to think on their own. You know, instead of everyone facing, and again, it works in some scenarios, but instead of everyone facing the front of the school being told where to go, what to do, it's getting kids to think on their own, creating independence, creating confidence. Once you see confidence in a kid, I mean, it's like lights out, lights out.
I just want to say to everybody that's listening, because we have a heavy entrepreneur-based audience, is what Ronnie is describing here is also the very best method to lead your own company. It's the very best method to create a culture within a business, is to answer a question with a question and help people become critical thinkers, help people own their own scenario and really understand it. When you were talking about, you know, I'm imagining what the conversation amongst a bunch of, you know, 6 to, 12-year-olds sounds like, of the difference between which is more important, please or thank you. And that is, in my opinion, learning. And so I'm going to speak from my own experience because, you know, I was always a good student in school. You know, I was bright enough to pass classes, and, you know, certainly I learned a lot from the schooling that I had, both, you know, K through 12, and then the couple of years that I spent in college before I decided that wasn't for me either. But the comparison that I always make, and one of the driving factors when Lori and I were talking about putting the kids in here, was my own education as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And that education was in a lot of ways self-guided, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when I found those things that I was really interested in, so I went from, you know, not being interested in reading books at all to I can't make enough time in the day to learn to read all the things that I want to know about. And so how does that carry over into what you see in the kids as they're learning, as they're advancing through their own education here? When you lean into those gifts,
Mm-hmm.
when you allow Picasso to paint, how does that result? You know, over the last few years, what have you seen out of the kids that have been here? How have they advanced, and how have those gifts kind of blossomed as a result of what they do here?
You're feeding into passion. You're creating confidence, period. I mean, when you allow somebody to be in charge of their own journey and they feel that empowerment, and you're not, I'll give you a perfect example. I've, again, three kids, 10, 7, and 5. And my 10-year-old, if I were to tell her, go upstairs and read your favorite book for the next hour, the answer would be, I don't want to, because it's not her decision to do so. Last week, my daughter and my son had asked if they could stay up a little later to read. Can you put can I put the night light next to my bed so I can stay up and read? And my wife and I were like, sure. And so they would compete against each other. And my daughter would go into my son's room and say, I just read another chapter. And he would go into her room and said it. And then they got smart and they said, can we both stay in the same room so that we don't have to walk back and forth, so that we can talk to each other about what we read? That was one of those moments where, you know, when you hear people say, just trust the system, because it takes a good couple of years for kids to be independent learners. You can't just, and I know some Actons do this, and I'm not saying that it's incorrect, but you can't just have kids walk into the school and be like, okay, see you guys later, good luck, and let them on their own. You have to have some sort of freedom within boundaries. And, you know, we all know that freedom isn't free. So you have to kind of earn the right to do certain things in the school. However, giving them the autonomy and helping breed that confidence so that they want to do things on their own. Oh man, it just starts to like unpack a whole new level of who they are as individuals. So I apologize that it didn't exactly answer your question, but what I've seen over time is that sometimes, you know, they always say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, or don't fit a square peg into a round hole. It's hard as parents when you want your kids to fulfill those things that you didn't fulfill. And you push them. Is that in their best interest, or are you trying to fill a gap that you were trying to accomplish as a kid, but didn't fulfill. Take your foot. There's a difference between slamming on the brake and taking your foot off the gas. They have more input and more drive and more gifts than you could ever imagine. Give them the opportunity to show that.
Yeah, man, I'm sitting here listening and I'm thinking about, my own experience with my kids. And, I think that's a very interesting conversation to unpack, right? The idea of, because all of us as parents naturally have that feeling of like wanting our children to exceed what we did, whatever that may be, right? Or if there was something missing, that we didn't learn or something we didn't excel at. And us as human beings, I think it's human nature, right? To like almost want that for them. But the level of awareness is what you're talking about,
Yeah.
right? Is like, if you can be aware of that as a parent, and you can have an environment where, again, during the day, they're being encouraged to explore their own gifts, they start to create their own path, right? As opposed to, and we see it all the time, right? Just kind of duplicating what their parents did.
Right.
They go to the same college, they take the same profession.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm simply saying, as parents, we should want them to be themselves, right? We should want them to create their own path. And that is, in my opinion, that's what I see here is like that freedom again to, explore and figure out what it is that their gifts are, what it is that they enjoy. And by the way, when you do that, we have the same result in my home that, our kids are excited to read.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a result of them being here or the competition or whatever it is, but we started a program for everybody that's watching that might want to say like, hey, how do I get my kids to read? We started, our kids want to buy stuff at the stores, right? They want, things like everybody else. You get tortured every time you go into Target to buy something. And so we just started a program, based on the length of the book, $20 or $10 every time they read a book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And man, it's amazing how motivated they get when they can get some cash in their pocket that can get them the things that they want. And that is something that, in the beginning, I was like, man, I don't know. But I'm like, man, we can teach them the value of money and we can teach them, the value of reading. And then again, it became kind of a competition. They're reading the things that they really enjoy.
Right.
I mean, I take my kids to Barnes and Noble and it's like a $200 trip. No kidding, because they're so interested in so many things. And so, to me, that's the investment. And that's a tough thing, man. Like, for people that are out there that, they're like, man, how do you pay? Well, to me, the most important thing in my life, like I would sacrifice anything for my children's education.
Right.
If it was my very last dollar, I would spend it to make sure that they were in the right place and they were around, the right ideas and getting the right information. Because, the other thing that I will say is it's a very short period of time that we have. That's a window to impact them, to create them into the little human beings that we want them to become, or the people that they are meant to be, right? That God, gave them the skills and talents and gifts to be. And, that time is so valuable. And so, you guys have been around for a couple of years here. How has that, how have you seen that? Like, how has your perspective shifted on maybe how things started at Acton, like kind of what your idea was when you started it, or what you thought the impact was going to be versus what you see now? Because to me, just looking at it from the outside, from, Acton as a school and as a community, I walked into like kind of the get together that you had with the parents before school started, and I felt 100% at home instantly, because of the community that has surrounded this school and the support that has, surrounded this school. How has that changed? What did you think it was going to be like, and what is it like now?
Well, starting in somebody's living room, I remember buying the first bookshelf that the 3 girls who were part of the school at the time put together. And it was an expensive bookshelf. And I said, wow, this is going to cost some money to put this all together. And how are we going to make this work? And then we just kind of, went from somebody's living room to a small 650 square foot studio that was awesome, grew into it. And then I had to make a choice. I was only based on the Department of Education in PA, I was only allowed to have 2 more kids in that space, which at 10 where we were was already kind of maxed out. So then you had to take the jump. The hardest part was to get into double digits with kids. Nobody wants to be like the 6th student at Acton Academy or the 7th student at Acton Academy, but people will fight to be the 15th or 18th. It's just just common. I spent a lot of time and money marketing to the community to try to, I guess, convince people to consider an alternative way of education. And it really resulted in almost nothing until we got to that number 10, 11th, 12th student. And then it was like, it just started to multiply. And now we're, I think by the end of this week, going to be about 24 students. We just moved into this space and I had to put 2 beautiful bathrooms in this suite. And I talked to the owner of the building and he said, you're going to need a bigger building next year. And it's not, again, our main goal, and it always has been this way, is quality over quantity. I don't care if we stay at 24 kids. I'd like to keep it under 100 in the future. But it has to be a good fit. The last thing I want is for somebody to be running from something, not towards something, and then just land at Acton and say, okay, this will buy us a little bit more time. Again, to my earlier point, it takes about 2 years for kids to become independent learners. And when that happens, it's magical. It really is. But you have to invest in the idea, not just in a short-term solution. The most important thing with more than 6 or 7 students is different perspectives. My son was the only boy at Acton for a minute, and my wife was so nervous that he would be the only boy at Acton because there was 5 or 6 other girls. And so we just kept on, and pretty soon we had 2 other boys that joined, and now we have more boys than we do girls, and it's just and it all happened within 10 months. So I think that different ages, different perspectives really help shape those conversations on a daily basis and help, empower and fuel the students versus before, whenever we had 6 or 7 students. Big difference.
Yeah, I think you said something really important there about, making sure that people are running to something, not from something. That's one of the things in life, and I think it's very important for people to recognize, because what happens in the world today is that, people are generally running from something, or rather, even sometimes worse than that, they're running to safety in a group of people that, all agree with them,
right.
And I think that, those open discussions, having the dynamics of, like you're saying, the different backgrounds, the different ways of thinking, the different ways to solve a problem, and then openly talking about that.
Right.
In my opinion, it's what the world needs in the adult realm as much as the kid realm. Right. And so, all of us can learn from that. And the other thing that you said there that I think is really important, and this is, again, another lesson that is relevant, because this is, it's a school, but it's ultimately a business as well. And when you're talking about, trying to attract people, it's a totally different method of trying to attract people through marketing than it is when you let the story unfold itself and you allow the people that are actually running to something to be able to find what it is that they're looking for on their own. And when you think about that and actually unpack it, what you're doing now to attract kids is exactly what you're teaching in the school.
That's it. It's so parallel. And until you take a step back to realize that, I mean, And
as a business owner, you have to remember, for those of you who are business owners that are listening, the power of building a community that is powerful, that believes in something, that really has the love, care, support, and fire to support what it is that this stands for, whatever that is for you. That is what it takes. It takes attracting people, not convincing people.
Right.
And, that is ultimately what the education here to kids teaches also.
We say that to every parent. I say, if you're looking for perfection, there's the door. Just walk out now, because you're not going to find it, nor do I want it. Our goal is to get better, to get stronger as a community every single week, every single month, every single quarter, every single year. And I'm hoping that we have this conversation again 365 days from now to look back to say, remember that little room that we were in? because the goal and the dreams and the aspirations that I have to be able to empower these kids to a whole other level, and with brilliant minds like yourself and the others that you've already met within our community, the sky's the limit. I mean, if you can think it, and this is what I try to tell my kids, if you can think it and you have the guts to not stop, you only fail if you quit, then you'll create it. And if you're thinking that, there's a good chance that somebody else is. And that's how you create these communities. So I'm not out to change the world. I wished I could, but I can't. All I want to do is be able to control my small community and grab some people who together we can make differences in the world. We just had a very grateful friend of mine deliver a very expensive indoor garden. Like, what school has an indoor garden where you can grow organic vegetables? And then the ideas that we have to build off of that, it's those kind of things that I'm fortunate that we can allow in the school without cutting through red tape or asking for permission. If there is something of the utmost quality, and this is what our team always discusses whenever we're looking at another program or resources, my first question is this the best? And if the answer is no, but the best is more expensive, it's get the best. I'll figure it out. And it's amazing how that attracts others. You can't be afraid to just tiptoe. You either go in or you stay out. There's kind of, I don't have a dimmer switch on my
yeah, that's why we get
life.
along so well. I'm the same way. So I want to talk about a couple of things. We could go all day here, but on the website, when I was doing the research, our promises to your child, he or she will begin a hero's journey.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that one.
Yeah. There's a graphic multiple places in the studio. The hero's journey. I can speak to myself, and this is what the kids of Acton are going to eventually get through. At first, you realize that there's something different with you. There's something that when we enrolled our daughter into a public school, it just didn't feel right. I knew that I was different, that my kids were different, that I wanted something different for them, not to run from something. My gut was that the educational system hasn't changed in the last 100 years, although the world is evolving rapidly. And my belief, I could be wrong, is that a large percentage of the jobs that exist right now won't be around in 10 years. I think that AI and other technologies are going to take place of so becoming highly specialized in one specific thing all the way through to college, to come to find out that this software just replaced you, you better be able to pivot quickly. Plus, you're going to have a lot of debt to be able to pay back. So now you're not leading with passion. Now you're working for money, not for purpose. So that's a big switch in my belief. When you realize that there's something that's wrong, you go searching for. I was listening to that podcast on my birthday back in 2018. Something resonated. I had chills from head to toe. I couldn't let it go. I listened to it again. And that's whenever I realized, okay, I'm being called into something bigger than just what we currently had. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So you're going from, I know that I'm different. I know that I'm called to do something. I'm in this very weird scenario where when I'm with a large group of people who can't see what I see, it's hard. It's like sucks the energy out of you. And then you kind of turn the corner to the 3 o'clock position and you find other people or one other person who has that same mentality, that same kind of light bulb, and you just connect like you and I did the first time we met. And it was like, this is going to turn into something special. And I texted you that day and I said, I don't know how, but we're going to work together in the future. I could just feel it. Once you start to come around, then you see, okay, now there's other people that want to join as well. 2, 3, 4 people, whatever it is, I'm going to finish on this journey. If you want to hitch your wagon to my, trailer or to my truck, then go ahead. Let's roll together. And then you start to get some momentum at the 6 o'clock position. Now you're like, you know what? We're going from the unknown down to like where I feel like this is something that can have a lot of traction that I didn't realize. I'm not the only one out there that thinks this way. And you come back up to the 9 o'clock position. You have a ton of strength. You have a ton of momentum. You get back to the 12 o'clock and it's like, okay, back to like almost like a reset. Now we have to grow. Now we have to find a bigger building. Maybe we need more staff. Maybe there's other challenges that you face that you never saw the previous time through that system. So that's the hero's journey. That's where we allow kids to fail in order to learn, in order to grow and succeed. We teach to be a hero, not a victim. I don't want to hear what the problems are. I want to hear what the solutions are to the problems.
Man, I'm gonna let that one simmer for a second, because let me tell you something. What is needed in the world, man, is exactly that mentality. And why that hits me so hard. Genuinely, man, I interact with a ton of people every week. I spend a lot of time on social media, and I interact with tons of people, man, from the people that I went to grade school with. I was just back at my high school Friday night for football games, all the way up to the people that I interact with, whether they're working for our companies or they're contractors that work across the country, whatever it is. The frequency that I see extremely gifted and talented people operate from a victim mentality, it crushes me.
Yeah.
It's because for me, I sit there and I literally, me, like, I want to help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to be able to make an impact. I want people to be able to see the things that I see. So when you said, when you start looking at things differently, the way that when you
change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yeah. And that's been my life. That's the title of this podcast, right? Powerful perspectives, like change the way that you look at things, man. And the whole world around you will change. And so, that idea of the hero's journey, man, there's some marketing things that go along with that. Like, how do you create a story around your business, things like that. It's so powerful to teach kids that not only is it okay to fail, man, it's great to fail when you don't have anything on the line, when you're young and you can learn those mistakes without a whole lot of damage. Right. I look at it now and say, boy, I wish somebody would have showed me that when I was 8 years old, had nothing to lose. Right. But that is what it's all about. The next thing here, it says, learn to be a curious, independent, lifelong learner. Yeah. And I think, we've covered a lot of that, but what does that mean to you?
It never ends. Learning never ends. I mean, it's like getting to the end of the internet. It's just impossible. I mean, the possibilities unravel. And again, I'm not knocking anyone whose school didn't succeed or they chose not to go any further. But if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. I could have taken an attitude of, oh, well, it closed, so I guess we'll just have to put him back into whatever's closest to our home and easiest. But I didn't want to do it that way. You never know. I mean, you never know how close you are to the finish line or the existing finish line or to gold. And if you stop digging just shy, and it's hard, it's really hard, because the last thing you ever want to do is screw up your kid's life or to not give them the best, or, what if this isn't right? But then once you start to see the small wins and they turn into more frequent wins, it's no different than any other sales position I've ever been in or anything in general. Attitude is everything. And the hardest part about this school was waiting for other people to catch up. I saw it. It was so clear. I mean, we started this process back in 2018, and the challenges that we had along the way. In 2018, world was a lot different than it is now. And that was 1,000 days ago. And the hardest part about being ahead of the curve is waiting for other people to join you. And during that time, you have to be really mentally strong, because you can convince yourself that you're the crazy one and that you're going down a journey that's unnecessary, until you realize that you're onto something and that this is the gift that we can give to our kids and make the world a better place when we leave here, which is all that matters, than whenever you came into the world.
Yeah, it's interesting, man, because what you just described, there's just so many alignments to it. Makes sense as to why there's so many entrepreneurs that have their kids in school here, because what you just described, that period of waiting and feeling, what you didn't say was the feeling of loneliness.
Oh,
right. And, for me as an entrepreneur, I've been blessed to find groups of people, the Acton parents have become one of those groups, right? Yeah. Where you don't feel weird being an entrepreneur, because you have a bunch of people that really understand some of the challenges that you go through, that when you don't text somebody back immediately, it's okay and accept it.
Yeah.
I like to say busy people understand busy people, right? You get forgiven for those things. But for much of my life, man, I felt weird being a person that worked really hard, had big goals, because, a lot of people would look at you strange, and that's the feeling that you were just describing, is like, not everybody's going to agree with you, and that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
That's, that's encouraged. And, in today's world, a lot of times that's what creates divisiveness, but it's not about that.
No.
We need different thinkers, and we need those conversations of people that don't agree to happen, but happen respectfully, so that we can all grow, because there are things that we don't know. Right. My mentor, I asked him why he reads so many books, and he said, I read to unlearn the things that I thought I knew. It's so true, man.
Yeah.
There's so many things that we're only our level of awareness in today's world, right here, right now, is only as good as the experiences that we've had, the books that we've read, the gut feelings that we followed. All of those things add up to, that's what life becomes.
Right.
And so if we are not in pursuit, to finish that bullet point, of being a lifelong learner, man, are we missing out. And so to everybody out there, if you're not committed to lifelong learning, if you're going, every day to a place that doesn't fire you up, whether it's, as an adult, or whether your kids are going to a place that doesn't fire them up, challenge it, man. Like, challenge yourself to make that change, because you will never regret the changes that you tried, even if they don't work.
Mm-hmm.
You'll only look back and regret the ones that you didn't take a shot at. Right.
There was a great quote that I saw that came through. I forget what it was, but I immediately text this to Kinko's and I said, make this as big as you can. The greatest fear in the world is of the opinion of others. And the moment you are unafraid of the crowd, you are no longer a sheep, you become a lion. A great roar arises in your heart, the roar of freedom. The hardest thing, and I had this blown up in the school for a reason, because that defines what we're trying to accomplish here. And if I would have listened to very smart, very good friends of mine say, why would you ever start a school? You have a great one right next to you 4 years ago. And I would have let that inner, maybe I am too off the rocker here. Maybe I should just go along with what, even though I don't agree with it, it's just easier because I don't want to offend anybody. And that's the kind of person I used to be. But once you get to a point where it's like, look, I'm not trying to disagree with you, but if you feel, like you had said, that there's something that's just off in your belief in the current system that your kids are in, there are solutions. And don't worry about what other people think, because at some point, the people that I never thought would be called, like I say, they used to call me crazy. Now they just call me. The people that I never thought would actually call and reach out and say, hey, man, okay, now I see. It's like those pictures, those pictures, I forget what they're called, but you stare at them and then something pops out at you.
Right. And
some people can see it and some can't. And you'll be standing in front of them thinking, I don't know how you see an elephant there. And the reality is they're like, how can't you see that? When you start to see something that you purposely are driven and called to do, it just makes sense. It just makes sense. You see it clearly and you want everyone to see it. But instead of pushing, to your point, don't be the tugboat, be the lighthouse. Just set it up, build it, and they will come. They will align. And I'm not trying to convince anyone. In fact, I try to do the opposite. Make it real hard to have them convince me that this is a good fit for their family, because I don't want everybody to join this. I really don't. I just want those that are in alignment, because it'll be a lot easier down the road.
Yeah, no doubt, man. So much to unpack there, man. And it kind of leads into the next bullet point here of develop a deep respect for economic, political, and religious freedoms. And when you were reading that quote, the first thing that came to my mind is that there's so much about what's going on in the world today. The idea of lions and sheeps, and even that becomes, somewhat political. And I think it's such an important point to make here that, like, there is the idea is not divisiveness.
No,
it is inclusion. And it is, genuinely having the curiosity to explore other people's thoughts, but doing so with a foundation that's super clear,
right,
about, again, economic, political, religious freedoms, right? That's what this country is all about, right? And if we lose that, and that is a very controversial topic right now, right? It's an exceptionally controversial topic. But I think that if we can all check our emotions, and we can all, I have the Constitution of the United States of America, the book sits on my bookshelf in my office. And I read it from time to time, man, to give me direction,
mm-hmm.
to recenter me, in this crazy world that sometimes we live in today, where even these types of discussions will incite like just an opposition that's indescribable in some cases, right? Talk to me about what that looks like, making sure that these kids understand what that means.
I don't like labels. I don't like, as far as going down the political avenue, I don't like left and right or red and blue. I kind of categorize things into heroes and victims. And honestly, I mean, if you're somebody who won't take ownership and you don't want to explore, beyond what your comfort zone is, and you have a lot of fear of failing, it's probably not a good fit. As far as, inclusion, I mean, there's really, during the interview process, there really aren't any questions around religious or political beliefs, but you can tell those that feel that there's something missing from their existing system that they're searching for, that they find here. And I almost don't even realize sometimes the small little nuances until parents bring it up to me. And I'm like, wow, you mean that really exists in the existing system? Because I've been removed from it for so long. And having that hero mindset as a family, you don't just send your kid to Acton and say, okay, here they are, good luck. It's a three-legged stool. You have the student, you have the family, and then you have the school. And we work together to grow and build on what we know. And we continue to learn more and continue to evolve the program. And that's, I think, important. You have to be willing to take that journey, not just to say, well, in the previous school, they did this. Why don't you do that here? I don't want that. I don't know if that answers your question without going too far down the.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to answer it and not necessarily go down the rabbit hole of what is
not
out
relevant.
there. Because it's what's important is the independent thinking, and what's important is, like, genuine, to your point, what you just explained is like true openness and true freedom, and what that means to these kids. It makes sense for that to be just something that makes sense, that's unspoken.
Yeah.
Right. Like it really is. And when we get into these deep discussions about what that means, I think it's confusing for adults in a lot of cases.
And then what happens when it's confusing is you completely shut down and you get nowhere in the discussion.
100%.
Yeah.
So I agree 100%. The next bullet point here is cherish the arts, wonders of the physical world, and the mysteries of life on earth. And that is to have that on a website of a school that teaches 6-year-olds is powerful. What does that mean to you?
The sky's the limit. You know what I mean? There's no, like I said, there's no preconceived thoughts or ideas. It's empowering kids to be able to express themselves and to see, because you learn a lot from kids. And if you kind of cut off that creativity or the idea of what's behind their, what their motivating factors are or forces are, I guess it's kind of hard not allowing them to be a free and open book. So, it's important, I think, to be able to have that freedom to delve into certain aspects of all aspects of learning, not just, open up a book and make sure that you're at this level in algebra or math or whatever. It's kind of all encompassing. This, to best explain Acton Academy, it's a holistic approach to education. We're not just treating a symptom. We're not just, well, you need to be at this level at this point in your life. If not, you're behind. I don't believe that. I just think that that's your journey. That's your path. Not everybody's meant to go down that same road, no matter if you're talking math, reading, spelling, or the arts, or, your different views on life or what you believe in. Everybody has that road, and it's an independent road, and it's different for everyone. I have 3 kids, you have 4. Do they all learn the same way? Are they all in the same trajectory? Are their attitudes all the same? Are their views on the world all the same? No. And for you to say you have to all be in alignment with what Daddy, wants you to believe would be a disservice for them. You'll never get them there, by the way, but they will turn away from you. So it's important to be able to have that freedom and flexibility.
Couldn't be more true, man. And, what I was thinking when you were responding there is, the arts and appreciating those. And, not every kid's going to be an artist. No. Not every kid's going to be an athlete. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be exposed to it.
Right.
On either, not every kid's going to grow up and go play professional sports, but the foundation that is laid from being a part of that, if that's part of their journey, if they show interest in that, is significant. Same thing with arts, right? Even just being in the presence of it helps well-round a child and expose them to things that otherwise they may not ever experience in their lives.
Right.
The last bullet point here, and then I have one final question for you.
Oh boy.
Discover his or her most precious gifts and learn to use them and solve difficult problems. I think for me, anybody that listens to this podcast, one of the things that I always talk about is your gifts. And this is an emotional topic for me because from the time I was a little boy, man, like, there was a couple people in my life that always saw something different in me than anybody else. Right. They believed in me at a different level. And to this day, I believe that much of what I've been able to create in my life sits on the foundation of really being able to tap into that belief that they had in me. Right. And so for me, that quote related to children is such a powerful one because I experienced it myself. Right. To not only, be able to discover your gifts, but to have other people searching for them and believing in them and fueling them is, in my opinion, of everything else we've talked about today, it's the single most important thing that people can experience, is to know what your gifts are and then spend every single day of your life using them for the good of others and the good of yourself.
Yeah. And that'll lead down roads that you never thought were imaginable. It's an emotional topic for me too, because I have very successful parents that are entrepreneurs, and everybody always says, well, why didn't you just take over your parents' business? And they were always guiding me to you do you, you fulfill your dreams, your goals. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago, do you think you'll start a school? I say there's a 0% chance, but life changes. And do I wish some days that somebody else would have started it in Pittsburgh and I just pay the tuition and send my kids? 100%. It's a lot easier that way, but it didn't happen that way. And being able to have, a support team that believes in you, and not everybody does. So I really cherish the fact that I have a support. When my wife and I were engaged, I said, I don't know where the journey's going to go, but it's going to be a wild ride. It won't be a normal one. All you have to do is be a great mom, a great wife, and just hang on, because I have no idea where this is going to go. But it won't be your normal, like, we're not just going to cruise at 65 and never change lanes. And she said, okay. And it's worked out tremendously well. The support that I have from my parents, moving from the old school to this school, you could just see it in their eyes where it's like, this is actually coming to fruition. Like, this is awesome. And it went from, I didn't want to tell anybody that I was doing this, to now it's at the point where it's like, I'm proud. I'm proud to say that this is something that we accomplished, and a lot of people worked very hard together to get this set up to, again, change the world that our kids are involved in.
Yeah. Great transition to my final question. And it is, you and I have talked offline about this, but I want you to really, think about this question and open your mind up and think about where does this go? And I hate putting time limits on questions because I had someone ask me in a podcast interview just a week or so ago, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, I don't like answering those questions because every time I've been asked it and answered it, I would have, sold myself short. I've sold myself short on the answer every time. So what does the future of Acton Pittsburgh look like? What is the size of it? What does the impact look like? What are the kids that are going through this school doing in the world as a result of their experiences here in the future?
So the conversations have already started with looking for land, building a campus. Obviously, we go up to 8th grade now, but we'll go beyond to what we call the Launchpad Studio, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, involving other businesses and getting these students acclimated with apprenticeships and internships and getting out there in the real world before they may or may not go to college. It's a whole other topic, but I don't know if everyone is cut out for college by the time our kids are of that age to go to college. They may not. but having the experience and being able to dive into in 10th grade, 9th grade, 11th grade into other businesses to see how they're run, to see if that's a connection that you may have. So we want to involve the community of other businesses, entrepreneurs, to see what sparks that fuel. From a campus standpoint, the sky's the limit. I mean, the ideas that I have for creating an environment that is just like allows these kids to experience where we're at now, the future. I mean, I could go on, and I don't want to put certain, like I said, time limits on things, because it all comes down to how large of a community this is. We have to, get to a certain point. Do I want it to be beyond 100 kids? I don't know. We'll see. But having, I have, being able to garden, having a podcast studio in the school, to be able to document kids' lives and let them know what the possibilities are in this upcoming futuristic kind of society that we're a part of. I mean, this was unheard of 15 years ago. And to think that you can make a living doing something like this is like, it's unheard of, but the sky's the limit. Food trucks, I mean, you name it. I have great ideas that I think would be awesome business opportunities to allow kids to inject themselves into the community and just, continue to build that train as it goes through our community.
All right. So I lied, because I got one last thing I wanted to cover and I didn't get to it, but you alluded to it there. So I met Ronnie literally at the Cranberry Township Farmers Market, right, where Acton Academy, these kids actually have a lemonade stand, right? And they essentially own and operate this lemonade stand on their own. Can you tell me a little bit about that idea? Because you alluded to the food truck, which is kind of an extension of that idea, but the value of that for these kids is incredible.
So we had, so Acton as the main Acton campus has what's called a business fair, and it's become a worldwide scenario where in March the kids will go through an e-quest or an entrepreneur quest for 5 weeks, learn all about business, how to structure it, profits and losses, how to create a business plan and execute on it, and showcase their talents. We're in a location now where, I've already talked to the building owner where we could have tents set up on a weekend in March where kids would have their service or product that they're selling, market to the community, and have them come and make actual, money and learn, just like you said, with the value of money and generating a profit and so on and so forth. So last year with the 8 kids that we had, they decided on a lemonade stand, and they just kind of altered. So we had sharks present like the Shark Tank panel, which happened to be my mom and my dad. And they had to pitch them the idea. And my parents had to kind of grill them on, well, what if it rains? What are you going to do? And how much is each, glass of lemonade? And what's the flavor? What's the name? How did you choose that flavor? In order for them to cut a check to say, okay, here's your $150 to start your business. We'll go ahead and do that or not. And both teams got the money, and they made a lot of money selling $1.25 lemonade. I think they made like $500, over the course of a couple of weeks. And yeah, it did rain in certain scenarios, and they had to figure out ways around that. But learning that at a young age is awesome, in my opinion. And being able to take just, from a lemonade stand to what is it that you want to do as an individual, whether it's making bracelets or walking dogs or cutting grass, and fueling that passion and learning about business at this young age. I just, again, I wish that this kind of environment was around whenever I was growing up.
No doubt, man. No doubt. It's such a powerful way to finish our conversation. But man, I know that people watching, probably are curious about, so much about how this works, how they can find something like this in their area. There's people all over the world that listen to this podcast. First of all, how can people connect with you, connect with Acton? And then what does it look like for people that might be searching for something like this all over the country?
So to connect with us, it's just Acton Pittsburgh, ACTON, Pittsburgh.com. That'll lead you to our site where you can get in touch with us and send an email. We'll start the interview process or whatever works best for the individual. To create your own Acton, actonacademy.org. You can start your own franchise anywhere in the world if there's not one that exists right now. And, we were the first in Pennsylvania to start Acton, and there's 6 or 7 more. There's one starting in the South Hills. I just spoke with that owner, and competition is great. I think the more Actons that come around, the more the market is saying that there's a need for something like this. And it's just like-minded ex-teachers or parents that want to start something different. So, yeah.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And I just want to say thank you again, man, first of all, for doing this, but more importantly for that, to have the courage, the vision, everything that it took to be able to create this back when nobody believed in it. Right. It was just, and I can relate to that being an entrepreneur. You know, you have this vision that nobody else really sees clearly, but you see it so clear that it's unbelievable. You can't unsee it. Yeah. And thank you, man, for creating this and for creating, you know, an environment where our kids, you know, my kids being selfish, my kids can flourish and learn. And then, man, I can't wait to see the journey. You guys that are watching, man, stay tuned, because, you know, as a community, this Acton community is powerful, man. There's so many, to your point, there's so many brilliant minds between yourself, your wife, the parents, everybody that's involved in trying to help move this thing forward and give everybody this type of opportunity to be part of something really special. So thank you for being here, man. Incredible knowledge and interview. Thank you for doing it. And until next time, guys, this is another episode of Powerful Perspectives. Keep tuning in, man, because we're going to keep bringing you world changers, entrepreneurs, celebrities, you name it. We're going to have them here. And hopefully every single episode is going to just shift your perspective just enough to make your future just a little bit better. Thank you guys for tuning in. Love you guys.